citywide food and agriculture strategy. If you're familiar with that and what's been happening in Edmonton right now, I have tried to get my little dirty fingers in there as much as I possibly can. When I heard there was going to be a citizens panel, I got somebody to get me in on that panel so that I could pump in as many permaculture and community-supported agriculture and community gardens and growing your own food type ideas as I possibly could. So I was part of that panel. When the panel finished its job, then they sent all the information to an integration committee, and they picked me to come help and make sure that what the citizens had said got translated properly and sent on to the big guys. So I was part of that one. And then I went to all the stakeholders meetings that I could get my hands on as well, because I'm an urban farmer. I grow in the city of Edmonton, and so I spent all the time that I could at the stakeholders meetings and tried to get as much as I could get done with those. I went to, one of the biggest things that we said with that panel, and all three of them, was that they spent $750,000 on that project so far. And that's a lot of money, and we just said our biggest concern was that the city would then take what we gave them and just do business as usual. So we really, really tried to express our concern that when the city councillors did something with the strategy, they needed to make sure they listened to what the citizens had to say. And that came out really well. I actually spoke yesterday morning at the presentations that they had at City Hall, and it came out with a number of different people exactly the same thing. Please do something with the money that you just spent on the panel. So I thought that was really quite interesting. I had the chance during the summer to go to the Way We Green, a panel discussion that they had downtown that had a number of different foodies talking. They asked them questions and then let them respond to it. One of the questions that they asked was, if we are going to protect land, do we protect the land in the city, the city part, or do we protect the northeast? And if you're familiar with it, that's a big, big political issue that's going on in Edmonton right now, is protecting this northeast land. And I mean, the answer is basically, why do you have to choose? But then another question came up later, and it was actually fielded by Susan Roberts, who's very much, most of you know who Susan Roberts is. And she said, how is the city going to provide food equity? How are we going to make it available to everybody, not just the rich people? Because farmers markets and CSAs, for the most part, are for people who have cash, not everybody. And I really had a hard time sitting still, because I wanted to jump up and say, the reality is both are answered by one answer. Both of these issues. Do we protect this land, or do we protect this land? How do we make it equitable? The answer is we have to get citizens growing their own food. If people are not growing their own food, it's never going to be affordable. In reality, the only way that I can afford to eat local food is because I grow it myself. I can't go to the farmer's market and do it. I don't have that much money. So I believe that the most important thing, and I passed this on in my talk yesterday, was the most important thing that we can do with this food strategy is to get as many people as possible growing as much food and as many different kinds of food as possible in as many different places as possible. So it's called, we need to get our fingers into the dirt. This, for the city, their responsibility is, if they don't want to do anything, get out of the way. Pass some bylaws that allow us as citizens to sustain ourselves, and this is where some of the permaculture stuff comes in, to sustain ourselves and free up some land, if at all possible, so that we can use some other land. And I'll give you an example of this with the aquaponics. This is where my blurb on aquaponics is going to come into this whole talk. Last year I decided I was going to get an aquaponics system in my backyard. So I did all the research on it, and I went and I found out that if you have a farm and you have a dugout and you want a license for fish, for trout, you have to pay $15 for a license to get fish on your farm. If I have one of those big white tanks that's 1,000 liters in the city of Edmonton, and I want to put tilapia in it because that's the only kind of fish that will survive in that kind of tank, $150 for a license. It's like, hey, that's really not very logical that they can get their fish for $15 and I have to pay $150 for it. Then I went looking for the fish themselves, and I went to the person who does, and he'll talk a little bit about his aquaponics system at Jasper Pigs. And the fellow that was there, he sells fingerling fish of all different kinds to all different kinds of people. To sell me tilapia fish was going to cost me $10 a fish this big. And I'm thinking, we really need to figure out a way to make things happen a little bit easier for people who want to sustain themselves. So that the River City Chickens getting the chicken bylaw passed so that people can have their own eggs and the whole system. In my talk yesterday, I said that if they want to be a world-class city, they need to look at the other world-class cities and then try and copycat them or one-up them. I said, if you, London has chickens. If you want to get rid of the apple maggot problem in Edmonton, you get chickens. If you want pet therapy, you get chickens. If you want a closed-loop ecosystem that's very healthy, get chickens. In Paris has bees. Probably about half of the food that we grow requires insects for pollination. If the City of Edmonton wants to look at the whole food security for the entire planet, get bees. My other comparison, and I'm going to leave that one because I have another. I also went to the Food in the City conference that they had here, and one of the keynote speaker there, I don't know if any of you attended that conference. It was really good, really interesting stuff. But the one thing that the keynote speaker said that really resonated with me is that if we want to get food security in the world, we need to become food actionists, not just activists. And I thought, that is so right, because here in the City of Edmonton, we have lots and lots of people talking local food. But there's not that many people actually growing it, and therein lies our biggest problem. So now, my second hat. Do you have internet? Can you go to on borrowed ground?
You bet.
My second hat, and probably the most important one, is I run a community supported agriculture project. If you know what CSA is, it's where you as a consumer say, okay, I want my food to be fresh, local, and clean. And I'm willing to pay a premium for that. So you say, okay, I want this, so I'm going to take my food dollar for this spring and I'm going to give it to this farmer. I'm going to commit myself to them so that if all hell breaks loose, and they lose their crop, it's 40 of us that are taking the hit, not just one farmer. And that farmer can make a decent living, and that farmer can stay in business even if things go bad. With my CSA, it's in the city. It's called On Borrowed Ground because and actually, do you want to scroll it up so you can see some of the pictures? What I'm looking for here is not for you. This is my website. Go home and read it. It's not so that you can read it now, it's so you can look at the beautiful pictures. Because that's it, this presentation is as scary as it is because I found out yesterday that I was doing this presentation, and I was volunteering until 10 o'clock last night and back in here at 7 o'clock this morning. So we're doing pictures from the website. It's a little, shorter. This is my backyard. It's a very, very small yard. I think that the biggest problem that we have with our society in general is that people don't know how to grow their own food. And they think that it's really onerous, it's impossible to do it. And if you take a permaculture approach to it, which is what I do, it's not that big a deal. You can grow a lot of your own food. I'm not saying that you can grow all of your own food, and I'm not ever suggesting that people do that. I like bananas, I like pineapple, and you can't have mangoes in Edmonton. So I grow as much of what I can, and I buy the stuff that I can't grow. My CSA focuses on education and land reclamation. It's called On Borrowed Ground because I borrow people's gardens and we grow the vegetables with my members. Members have to put in 4 hours per month, and in my perfect world, they come at 6 o'clock, work for an hour, take their vegetables at 7 o'clock and go home. It's as local as you can get because they can get off the number 17 bus at my house, so you don't have to drive out to a farm anywhere. It's as clean as you can get. I use no pesticides. It's not certified organic because when you borrow other people's gardens, you can't go through the paperwork of getting it done. And it's as self-sustaining as any farm that's out there because it's basically me and my fork. But my biggest thing that's the most important is that I spend my time teaching people how to grow their own food. And I know that I'm going to lose a lot of members in the process of doing this, but that's a main goal of mine as well, is to teach people and then teach the next group and then teach the next group. I also, with this, I started what's called the Great Raspberry Lane Project. I believe in borrowing land from the city, even when they don't know if I'm doing it. I have the Great Raspberry Lane Project is in the alley behind my neighbor's house. It's not even mine. My house has cement behind the garage. So in behind the neighbors, I have taken their land and put in raspberry patches. And one raspberry patch that's this long takes care of 20 CSA members. My freezer is full of raspberries, and all the neighbors enjoy it. And it's an idiot-proof raspberry patch. So it, to me, is the ultimate of a permaculture installation. Is you just put it there, and then everybody just eats off of it, and and it's so easy. So once a year, I have people come in and help me do the pruning part of it, which is really the biggest pain of a raspberry patch. They help me with that, and I teach them how to put their own patch in. My other guerrilla gardening is on a berm, city property, in behind one of my other gardens. The city said, no, you can't garden back there. And I said, okay, what you don't know won't hurt you. And therefore, I'm busy gardening back behind there. And the biggest thing that I discovered this year was, you can take tons and tons of bags of leaves and throw them in here in the fall. In the spring, you plant potatoes in there. They don't go in the ground, they go in the leaves in the top. And as they grow, you heal them up with more leaves. And in the fall, you just kind of brush the leaves aside, pull the potatoes out and take them home. They don't have any dirt on them, they're completely clean. You might want to get a cat, because there's a few mice around the things. But the end result of the leaves was the best leaf mold that you could possibly imagine that can then go into my other gardens that are too hard. So it is permaculture recycling of and building soil through what's already there. So I collect probably 100, 200 bags of leaves in the fall and stick them back there in what I call the back 40, that is city property in my rural garden. I want you to go, if you can, to Kent. On the members page, and scroll down. I have one member there, and this one here I do want to tell you about this guy. He says he was part of the Safeway generation. He had no experience in gardening whatsoever, and he was really excited to see how big a zucchini can actually get, and what carrots look like when they come out of the ground. It was just amazing, this guy. But I've been running this CSA for 4 years. He's been a member for 3 years. He started putting a garden into his yard, which meant the lawn is slowly disappearing, and he's learned how to grow gardens. This year I went to his house and I'm going, geez, Kent, your garden is way better than mine. Like, I've got 10 gardens on the go, and you've got this gorgeous, gorgeous, wonderful garden. Like, in next year, you're not going to need me anymore. And he said, wrong. Next year, I'm going to buy the membership, and I'm donating it to the Youth Emergency Shelter. And I thought, oh, yes. And this is his bike. He travels around like he goes from one of my gardens. He'll pick up stuff at one garden and bring it over to my house at the pickup. So it is a really sustainable local type system, which is really cool. The other thing that I offer with my CSA is a consultation thing. If you join the CSA and you have a yard, I will come and spend an hour or two at your yard and tell you what I would do with it. I'm not saying this is what you have to do with your yard. It's called, this is what I would do with this space if I had this space. And in every single one of those ones, I tell them about a permaculture installation. Put in sour cherry trees. Don't plant apple trees. There's so many apple trees in the city, you don't need to. Go borrow someone else's apples and grow something that isn't, there aren't copious amounts of them. Put in your raspberry patches where they can't run anywhere. Put in this, and it's permaculture approach of layering and putting things in that are permanent. My CSA has pickup the last weekend in May, or the last week of May. All the other CSAs in the Edmonton area don't pick up till the 1st of July. And the reason for that is because A, I'm right in the city and I have the microclimate, the heat island that we have here, and B, because I focus on perennial stuff. This is the permaculture factor. If you get all those perennials, they're up and they're growing and they're harvestable long before the food that you planted in your gardens. I have beds that are made up that I never work. I just pour the compost on top and let the worms do all the work with it. So when it's spring, I don't have to wait for the soil to dry out enough and warm up enough for me to rototill it. I just plant it. And when it gets warm enough and the things are up the ways, I throw some more mulch on top, and then the worms keep on feeding the soil for me, so I don't have to do that work. Permaculture is very much a, let's see how little work I can do. And so chop and drop, don't haul it off to a compost bin, put it right there, let it decompose. And I get this over and over again. But you can't weed a garden and put it right in the bed, it'll just grow some more. No, it won't. Especially if you weed in the morning, the sun will kill it. On the discussion with the city, one of the things that I have, now I'm going back to this, one up everybody else. This last year or the year before, Seattle put in a 7-acre food forest. They gave, right in the middle of Seattle, 7 acres of land to build a food forest. And I say, Edmonton, if you want to one-up Seattle, this is how you do it. This year I went to communities in South Edmonton where I live. And I said, look, I will help you put in community gardens. I'll give you all the knowledge that I have and the wherewithal and tricks and the cheap ways to do this, in exchange for 2 beds that I can use with my CSA. They came back with, you can't make money off of city property. A hockey arena can, but I can't. I'm going to make $60. He's going to make gazillions of bucks. But I can't make money off city property. And besides, we have baseball and we have soccer, and you cannot have a community garden in this land. There's just not any room. And I say, if you can take that guy and swing him so he's facing that direction. This is the Duggan School, which is near my community, is where I live. If you look, there's a chain link fence. The whole entire south side, whole entire west side, whole north side, whole east side. If you give me 8 feet right along that fence, the entire thing. I can give you back 1 acre of food forest in every single community in the entire city of Edmonton. We've one-upped Seattle. That is way more than 7 acres. And in that community garden, this thing, I'm going to put community gardens, food forest. I'm going to put a CSA who's going to take care of it in the summer. That's one of the big problems with school and yard gardens, is who takes care of it in the summer when everybody's gone home. Link, partnership with the CSA, and you have the problem solved. You have somebody to take care of that garden. Plus, you have a mentor to teach the people. Plus, if it's me, I have an education degree, and I can come into your classroom and teach them all they need to know about worms. And we can take that compost, we can set up a composting system in your school. And all of these little children are then getting their hands in the dirt. GSA, or GIA, major movers in this food policy thing that's going on. Debbie Hubbard one day said, without local farms, there is no local food. And my response is, but without local farmers, there is no local food. And that's where I think is the biggest problem with the whole issue, is that we don't have people who are actually growing food. We have, in Alberta, canola, grain, meat that are all mostly being exported. But we don't have vegetable gardeners to sell in Edmonton. We have farmers markets, and you guys have to watch the clock and tell me when to stop, right? We have farmers markets, but there's no vegetables being sold there because there's no farmers to do it. So what I say is that the way that you can get farmers is you get kids' hands in the dirt. And pretty soon you're going to addict some of them. They're going to say, this is so much fun. I want to do this some more. And in a situation like this, you have seniors in the community who can come and help, and they're mentoring and they're teaching people, and you can set up some kind of a food, let's teach you how to can if you want. I'm not going to do that, I hate cooking. But you know, somebody else is going to do that. So there's so much potential here for putting in food in these locations, and we can become much more self-sufficient than we are right now, and people will learn how to grow their own food. This lady here, you may or may not know this person, but I'm going to share the story with you, and I may or may not cry. My sister told me once you have a baby, they reconnect your tear ducts to your bladder, and therefore you just cry over nothing. So that's, if I cry, just ignore it. She tells the story. This woman is she was an activist in Africa. She got the Nobel Peace Prize for planting trees. She passed away 2 years ago, I believe. Yes, there she is. A fascinating story that she tells about a hummingbird. There's a forest fire, and the forest is burning up and there's this little hummingbird. And she goes to the river and gets her little mouthful of water, or her beak, goes back and drops it on the fire. Goes over and picks up, goes back and drops it on the fire. And the elephant's standing there looking at her, like all the other animals are lined up here watching this hummingbird do this. And the elephant, who has the capacity to get some water on the fire, says, what are you doing? You're just, I mean, this is crazy. Why are you doing that? And the hummingbird says, I'm doing the best I can. And so that's my proposal, is that every single one of us do the best we can. We have to change our food system somehow. And I believe honestly that it needs to start with the actionists here, one person at a time, hands in the dirt playing with the worms.